The hull cried out before I even realized we were being attacked. I was strapped into the command chair of the Kestrel, halfway through a mouthful of stale coffee, watching ice crystals drift past the forward window like frozen dust in slow motion. We had been stationed above Bishop's Reach for 3 peaceful days, running supply rotations and listening to the constant hum of a facility that pulled ore from the rings of a gas giant on the farthest edge of human territory. 3 dull, perfect days. I would have traded anything to keep them that way. Then the sky split apart. 6 shapes emerged from folded space at once, so close to the station that the gravity surge rattled my teeth. They were massive. Each one stretched longer than Bishop's Reach itself. Black and ridged like the skeleton of something that had died but somehow learned how to move again. They did not slow down. They did not send a greeting first, the way ships are meant to. They simply appeared, spread themselves into a slow, deliberate arc, and waited. Captain Hole, my pilot, Owen Webb, had gone pale beneath his freckles. His hands were already locked around the controls. "Captain, those aren't ours." "I can see that, Owen. Those aren't anybody's." He was right. And that was what sent a chill crawling across the back of my neck. In 9 years flying the frontier, I had recorded every registered hull humanity possessed, along with most of the Wildcat vessels that officially did not exist. I had never encountered anything like the shapes suspended above Bishop's Reach. They carried no running lights, no markings, no visible engines, only a faint ripple across their sides like heat rising from pavement under a summer sun. "Sam, get me the station," I said. My communications officer, Sam Porter, was already moving. Sweat glistened on his forehead. "Channels open, Captain. They're panicking over there. Director Hans is asking what they want us to do." That was the wrong question. The station director was asking a 30-year-old escort captain what to do about 6 ships large enough to make small moons look insignificant. I had no answer. What I had was a crew of 41 people, a quick little vessel designed to hunt smugglers, and a terrible feeling crawling steadily up my spine. Then the message arrived. It did not come through any human channel. It came through every one of them simultaneously, along with several frequencies we did not even recognize, flooding every receiver on the station and aboard my ship with the same calm, measured voice. The translation matrix faltered, adjusted, and finally shaped it into words I could understand. I have listened to that recording 1,000 times since. I will never lose a single syllable of it. Population of the listed system. You are addressed by the Concordance. Your species has been surveyed, indexed, and assigned. Your compliance rating is provisional. You will cease all transmissions, deactivate all weapons, and prepare your installations for assessment. Resistance will be recorded and corrected. Submission will be rewarded with continued existence. This message will not repeat. The assessment begins now. For several seconds, nobody on the bridge spoke. The coffee remained cold in my hand. I placed it down slowly. The way you put something down when you no longer trust yourself to keep holding it. "Indexed," Lena Voss said softly. She was my science officer, sharp-eyed and usually the calmest person anywhere she went. She did not sound calm now. "They said surveyed and indexed. Captain, they have been watching us for a long time," she continued. "Long enough to give us a number." "Compliance rating," Marcus Lowe added from the tactical station. Marcus was a large man with a slow voice, and the slowness had disappeared. "They've got a file on us like we're livestock that hasn't been measured yet." I have spent a lot of time thinking about that moment in the years since. About what it must have looked like from their side. The Concordance had done this before. They had done it hundreds of times. They appeared from the darkness above some young species frontier, delivered their cold little speech, and watched the lights go out and the weapons shut down. They had a procedure, and the procedure always succeeded because every species they had ever encountered had reached the same conclusion the Concordance expected. 6 impossible ships against 41 people meant you raised your hands and hoped. They had assigned us a number, a provisional rating. They expected us to react like everyone before us. They had no idea who they had chosen to categorize. Director Hans is asking again, Sam said, his voice unsteady. He wants orders, Captain. The station has 1,100 people on it. Minors, families. There are children over there, Captain. 1,100, the number hit my chest like a weight. I released myself from the command chair and stood because I think clearer on my feet and because I did not want my crew seeing how badly my legs wanted to give out. Lena, I said, tell me about those ships. Fast. What were they built to do? She pulled the sensor returns onto the main display, stacking the readings over one another. Her hands moved in quick, precise motions. Heavy, dense, mostly shielding in power. Very little we'd consider living space, which means the crew is either buried deep inside or there isn't one at all. The shimmer along their flanks is a deflection field, and it's tuned. Captain, it's extremely tight. I'm reading energy capacitors charging across all 6. They're preparing to fire. Tuned for what? She looked up at me, and I watched her understand the question a fraction of a second before answering. Energy weapons. The field is designed to bleed off beam and plasma attacks. It's a barrier against the kind of war they expect to fight. Lasers, particle cannons, that entire category. They've built their defenses around the assumption that everyone attacks with light. That was the first fracture. I still could not see the entire shape of it, but I could feel the edge. The way you sense a drop in the darkness before your foot finds empty space. Marcus, I said, our cannons. If we hit one of those fields with everything the Kestrel has, what happens? Nothing good for us, he said honestly. We scratch it, they notice, they turn around, and we become a very small cloud. That was what I thought. I turned toward the window. Bishop's Reach hung before us, a wheel of light and metal rotating slowly against the bruised, colorless bands of the gas giant. And beyond it, shining faintly within the planet's outer ring, was a long, narrow structure I had passed 100 times without ever giving it a second thought. The ore launcher. Bishop's Reach did not move its ore with slow-moving tugs. The fuel cost made that impossible. Instead, the station extracted dense metals from the rings, compressed them into raw slugs, and fired those slugs down a rail almost 4 kilometers long, launching them at incredible speeds toward a collection point in the inner system where they could be captured and processed. It was a mass driver, a cargo cannon. It hurled stone and metal so quickly that the slugs burned bright. It was not a weapon. It had never been designed as one. The Concordance watching us from the darkness, cataloging us, assigning us a number, would have looked at that launcher and seen exactly what it was, a machine for transporting ore. They had created their elegant, specialized shields to survive the wars they expected. They had never considered that the war they were about to begin would be fought with rocks. Sam, I said, and my voice sounded steadier than I felt. Patch me through to Director Hans. Private channel. Just him and me. A click. A nervous breath came through the line. Captain Holt, please. I don't know what they want me to do. The station was never built for this, Marcus. I need you to listen to me, I said. I need you to stop talking and listen, because we have about 4 minutes before those ships begin their assessment, and I don't think we are going to like what that means. Can you do that? Can you listen? A swallow. Yes. Yes, I can listen. Your ore launcher. Is it loaded? There was a pause. The kind of pause that meant someone was trying to process a question that sounded impossible. The launcher. It's yes. There's a slug already in the rail and a full magazine behind it. We were preparing for a shipment run tomorrow. But Captain, that's a cargo gun. It can't, I know what it is. I need control of it. I need to be able to aim it. And I need you to do exactly what I tell you, exactly when I tell you. I also need you to begin moving everyone you can into the deep core sections and the lifeboats right now. This second, while we're talking. Can you give me control of the launcher? The silence lasted so long I thought the connection had dropped. Then, in a voice that had found something beneath the fear, he answered. It was built to throw or toward the inner system. A pause. The inner system is that direction. Those ships are not. No, I said. They're not. But the rail traverses. It was built to compensate for orbital drift. How far can it swing? His voice became stronger. Enough. It can swing enough. I'll route control to your ship. I'll get my people into the core. Captain Holt. Another pause. Whatever you're about to do, do it well. I have replayed that conversation more times than I can count. A frightened administrator who had never carried a weapon deciding in a single breath to place a cargo cannon in the hands of a stranger because the other choice was watching his station get assessed. People talk about the legendary battles that came later, the fleets, the admirals, the famous final stands. They forget it began with a man named Hans and a machine designed to throw rocks. Lena, I said, I need a firing solution. Treat the launcher as a kinetic weapon. Lead the nearest ship. Account for the field. I looked at the display. But I don't think the field is going to matter. Their deflection is tuned for energy, and a solid metal slug moving at launcher velocity is just mass. Mass doesn't care about their wall. She was already working, her fingers moving rapidly across the controls. Captain, if you're right, if that field really only handles energy, then a slug at full launcher speed is going to strike them like a falling mountain. They won't recognize it as a threat. There is no energy signature on a thrown rock. No targeting lock for them to detect. Nothing for their systems to identify. That's the idea. And if you're wrong about the field. I looked at the 6 dark shapes preparing to fire on 1,100 people. Then we find out the hard way. Solution coming up, Lena said. Owen, I need the Kestrel to hold this exact position. The launcher's tracking will calibrate from our sensor feed. If we move, the slug moves. Holding, Owen said, and the little ship stabilized beneath us, pushing back against the gas giant's pull. On the main display, a thin line appeared from the ore launcher, bending slightly to account for the station's slow rotation, extending across the darkness toward the closest of the 6 ships. The enemy vessel remained there, patient and silent, overflowing with power, its tuned field shimmering, its capacitors climbing toward the moment it would begin its first assessment of Bishop's Reach. Capacitors on the lead ship are at 90%, Marcus reported. 80 seconds. Maybe less before it fires. Director Hans, I said, are your people clear of the rail and the magazine? Clear, he replied. Core section sealed. Lifeboats loading. We are as ready as we can be. Then on my mark, I want you to fire the launcher. Not one slug. The entire magazine. Everything in the rail. One after another, as fast as it can cycle. Empty the gun. He did not ask for an explanation. I think he understood. A single slug could be mistaken for a random piece of debris, an unlucky fragment from the rings. A constant stream of metal slugs, each one moving fast enough to burn, would be impossible to ignore. And by the time their specialized shields realized that the falling mountains were not something light could simply bleed away, it would be far, far too late to do anything except take the impact. Capacitors at 95, Marcus said. Captain, Lena, solution locked. Locked. Lead ship, dead center of mass. I took one breath. I thought about the 1,100 people sealed away in the core sections. I thought about that flat, patient voice that had called us a listed population and reduced us to a number. I thought, just for a moment, about how unbelievably surprised they were about to become. "Fire," I said. "Empty the gun." Bishop's Reach came alive. The ore launcher did not thunder the way a cannon would. There was no atmosphere in the rings to carry sound. It simply began firing, a pulsing flash of light racing down the 4-kilometer rail as slug after slug accelerated to a velocity that turned solid metal into a streak of fire. The first slug crossed the distance between the station and the lead enemy ship in less than a heartbeat. On the display, it appeared as a line of light reaching outward, making contact, and then gone. The lead ship's tuned field surged as it attempted to do what it was designed for. It had been built to capture energy, to scatter the force of a beam, to dissipate the fury of plasma. It met the first slug, a dense chunk of mined metal moving faster than anything that field had ever been designed to understand. And the field did absolutely nothing. There was no energy to drain. No beam to scatter. No heat to disperse. There was only mass. And the field had no answer for mass. The slug passed through the shimmering barrier like a stone through a soap bubble and struck the darkness hidden beneath. The second slug hit a fraction of a second later. Then the third. Then the fourth. The launcher emptied its magazine in a long, violent stream of light, and every slug arrived without a single energy signature for their systems to detect, without a targeting lock to warn them, without anything except the oldest and simplest truth in the universe. A heavy object moving very fast. The lead ship's lights vanished, not all at once. They flickered, surged, and then disappeared in waves that rolled across the enormous ribbed surface of the vessel as everything inside began to fail. Under the constant impact, the tuned field collapsed. The faint shimmer along its hull faded away. The massive, patient ship that had emerged from folded space expecting to deliver a speech and watch us surrender our weapons suddenly drifted like something that had forgotten how to stay alive. "Capacitors on the lead ship just went cold," Marcus said, and wonder had replaced the fear in his voice. "Captain, it's tumbling. It's not firing. It's not doing anything. It's just falling." For several seconds, nobody on the bridge breathed. Then the other 5 ships moved. They had not understood at first. I think that was the part that mattered most. Their systems had classified the slugs as debris, something they had probably encountered thousands of times across thousands of ring systems. They dismissed it because nothing in their long history had ever intentionally thrown a mountain at them. By the time they realized one of their own ships had been destroyed by a cargo launcher, the magazine was already empty, Bishop's Reach was already cycling another load, and my little ship was already moving. "Owen, get us into the rings," I said. "Deep into the rings. Straight into the densest section, and I want you to fly like you've never flown before. Lena, keep the launcher connected to our targeting feed. Director Hans, reload and fire again the second you can. Marcus, give me a debris map. The densest rock in this system. Find it, because that's where we're going to survive, and that's where they're going to come." I looked at the enemy ships closing behind us. And that's where their beautiful energy shields are going to mean absolutely nothing. The Kestrel Dove. Owen pulled us away from the open darkness above the station and down into the rings of the gas giant, into the slow, grinding ocean of ice and stone that circled the planet in bands kilometers thick. Boulders the size of cities drifted past the window. Owen threaded between them at speeds that should have been impossible, banking, rolling, using the rock itself as cover. The 5 surviving enemy ships followed us. They followed the station. And they fired. Their weapons were beautiful and horrifying. Pale beams of light stretched across the rings, splitting boulders apart and turning ice into glowing clouds. They were energy weapons, every single one of them. Exactly as Lena predicted. Because the Concordance had built its entire way of war around the assumption that everyone fought with light. But inside the rings, surrounded by endless fields of stone and ice, those perfect weapons struck debris far more often than they struck us. Because Owen Webb always managed to place a mountain between us and them. And because a beam that hits a boulder stops at the boulder. Owen flew like a man who had stopped being afraid because fear had become something he could no longer afford. A pale lance of fire swept past the forward window so close that the heat bloom overwhelmed every sensor we had. For one blind second, we were flying with nothing except the map inside Owen's mind. In that second, he rolled us around a tumbling mountain of ice on pure instinct. When the sensors recovered, we were racing through a canyon of frozen rock, walls a kilometer high rising on either side of us. A glowing scar burned across the boulder we had been hiding behind only a heartbeat earlier. "How are you doing that?" Marcus asked quietly. "The way someone speaks when they are standing somewhere that feels sacred or doomed." "I'm not thinking about it," Owen said through clenched teeth. "The second I think about it, we stop existing. So please, everyone, do not make me think about it." Behind us, the great dark ships tried to follow us into the rock and failed. They were built for the clean geometry of deep space, where range, power, and patience decided everything. Inside the chaotic maze of the rings, they were blind giants striking at shadows. Every time one committed to a firing path, the rock absorbed the shot. Every time one slowed down to navigate carefully between the boulders, it gave the station launcher another handful of seconds to reload. I watched it unfold across the display, and beneath the terror, I felt the first outline of the war we had unknowingly entered. They had the strength. We had the darkness, the rocks, and a pilot who refused to think about what his hands were doing because thinking about it would have been the end of all of us. "They don't like the rings," Lena said, studying the sensor returns. "Their fire is getting unpredictable. They're built to fight in open space, Captain, where their range and shields and power give them the advantage. In here, surrounded by rock, it's close and chaotic and uncertain. This isn't the kind of war they know how to fight." "Then that's the only war we're going to give them," I said. "Director Hans, status on the launcher." "Reloaded," he replied. His voice had changed completely. It was now the voice of a man who had discovered something about himself in the last 4 minutes that he would never forget. "Magazine full. Tell me where to throw." "Second target locked," Lena said. "Same as before. Dead center. They still aren't recognizing the slugs as a threat, Captain. Their systems keep identifying them as debris and ignoring them. They haven't adapted. They don't know how." There it was again. The second crack. Wider this time. Opening into something I could finally begin to understand. The Concordants had a number for us. They had a script. They had built their entire method of war around the belief that they understood the species they hunted. And the thing they had never planned for the flaw in all their years of careful indexing was that humans do not fight the war someone expects us to fight. We fight the war we have a chance of winning. We take a cargo launcher and turn it into a weapon. We disappear into the rock where your magnificent ships lose sight of the battlefield. We throw mountains at enemies who never once imagined that a mountain could be thrown at them. "Fire," I said. "Empty the gun again." Bishop's Reach came alive a second time, and another enemy ship learned the lesson the first one had learned. A tuned energy field was a fortress against the war the Concordants understood, but an open doorway to the war humans were about to introduce them to. The slugs passed through the shimmer and into the dark hull beneath. Lights flickered, spread, and died. The enormous ribbed vessel stopped firing and began its slow descent into nothing. 2 down. 3 left. And those final 3 finally understood that something had gone terribly wrong. They broke away. All 3 surviving ships pulled back from the station and away from the rings, climbing toward open space where their style of war belonged. And for one brief, impossible moment, I thought we had done it. I thought we had actually forced them away with a cargo launcher, a fast little ship, and the desperate ingenuity of 1,100 terrified miners. Then I saw what they were doing. And my stomach tightened. They were not retreating. They were pulling back to report. "Captain," Lena said quietly. "The lead survivor is preparing a folded space transmission. A large one." She stared at the readings. "It's not a weapon. It's a message. They're sending everything they recorded. The station, our ship, the launcher, all of it. Back to wherever they came from." I watched the three dark shapes rise away from the rings, and I understood with a cold certainty that has never left me what had actually happened. We had not won. We had survived. And those are two very different things. The price of survival was that the Concordance now knew its calculations about us were wrong. They had categorized us as a listed population with a provisional compliance rating, expecting us to shut down our systems and surrender like every species before us. Instead, we had thrown mountains. Instead, we had destroyed two of their impossible ships with a machine built to move ore. They would not record us as compliant. They would record us as a problem. And the Concordance, throughout its long and patient existence, had always known how to handle problems. "Let them go," I said quietly. "We can't stop the transmission, and we can't catch those ships. Owen, take us back to the station. Director Hans, get me a casualty report and a damage assessment. Lena, I want every piece of data we collected on those ships. Their weapons, their shields, their movements. Package everything and prepare it for transmission the second we clear the rings." I looked at the display. Every fleet, every colony, every listening post humanity has. They need to know what is coming. And they need to know how it can be hurt. What it can be hurt with, Marcus said slowly, is rocks. "Then that is what we tell them," I said. The Kestrel climbed out of the rings as the three enemy ships folded space and disappeared, carrying their report back into the darkness. Below us, Bishop's Reach turned slowly, scarred along one side where a stray beam had struck. Lifeboats surrounded its core like small birds gathering around their nest, but the station still turned. Still intact. Still alive. 1,100 people. The first 1,100 humans in history to look up at the Concordance and refuse to power down. Director Hans's voice came through the channel one final time before we escaped the rings. He sounded exhausted and shaken, but beneath it all was something stronger. Defiance. "Captain Holt," he said, "when you make that report, when you tell them what happened here, make sure you tell them this too." A breath. We didn't know who they were. Another pause. But now they know who we are. I looked into the darkness where the three ships had vanished, carrying their data home. I thought about the calm, emotionless voice that had assigned us a number. And I thought about how very, very surprised someone somewhere was about to be when they read what their survey ships had recorded above a frontier mining station nobody had ever cared about. "They started something here today," I said. "I don't think they understand what they started yet. I watched the stars ahead. But they will." We cleared the rings. Sam opened every channel humanity possessed, and I sent the warning into the dark. The first warning of the war. Carrying the data, the casualty count, and the impossible truth that 6 of their ships had arrived to assess us, and only 3 had left. I did not know then how far it would spread. I did not know about the fleets. Or Holden's world. Or the weapon they would build to erase us. Or the long, brutal road between that day above Bishop's Reach and the day it finally ended. I did not know that the Concordance kept records of every species it had ever defeated, an index of civilizations broken and subdued stretching back farther than human history itself. And I did not know they were about to create a new entry. Ours. I only knew 2 things as the Kestrel turned toward home with the warning streaming behind us. The first was that the deadliest war humanity had ever faced had just begun. The second was that the Concordance had no idea, not even a little, that the deadliest creatures in that war were going to be us. The recording from Bishop's Reach reached the Human Council 11 hours before the Concordance's reply did. And in those 11 hours, everything changed. I was in a debriefing room on Anchor Station, the massive rotating hub above the inner colonies, when the council finally understood what they were seeing. I had flown the Kestrel there directly, pushing her engines far beyond comfort the entire way, because I did not trust a transmission to carry the full weight of what we had witnessed. Some things have to be spoken aloud. Some things have to be heard from the person who survived them. The room was filled with admirals, ministers, and analysts whose faces had gone pale. At the end of the long table sat Admiral Ruth Calder, a small, gray-haired woman with eyes like frozen steel who had spent 40 years preparing for a war everyone else insisted would never arrive. She watched the recording twice. The 6 ships emerging from folded space. The calm voice assigning us a number. The Ur launcher emptying itself against a shield designed with no answer for mass. 2 enemy vessels going dark and falling. 3 retreating to report. When the recording ended, the room stayed silent. Admiral Calder looked down the table at me. "You hit them with a cargo launcher," she said. "Yes, Admiral. Because their shields are built to stop energy weapons, and a thrown rock has no energy signature for them to detect." "Yes, Admiral. Their entire defense system is designed for the war they expect. Beams. Plasma. Particle cannons. Anything that travels as light." She paused. "They never built a defense against mass because, throughout their entire history, nobody ever forced them to." For a moment, she said nothing. Then she stood, walked to the wide observation window, and looked down at the colonies turning below us. Millions of lights. Billions of people. A species spread across a handful of worlds that, until 11 hours earlier, believed it was alone. And safe. "They will come back," she said. "Not with 6 ships. With 600. She turned slightly. "They recorded everything you did. Which means when they arrive, their shields will be adjusted, their tactics rewritten, and their understanding of us corrected. The cargo launcher worked once because it was unexpected. We will not get that advantage again." She faced me. "But you taught me something far more important than a trick, Captain Holt. You taught me how they think. They surveyed us. They indexed us. They assigned us a number before they ever fired a shot." Her eyes hardened. "That is a species that fights by formula. They had a procedure, and they had followed it so many times across so many worlds that they had forgotten how to fight anything that refused to follow it." Her iron eyes held mine. "We are going to break that procedure so completely that their formula stops working altogether." A pause. "And you, Captain, are going to help me do it." That was how the war truly began for me. Not above Bishop's Reach, where I had only been trying to keep 41 people alive. But in that room with Admiral Calder, when she showed me that what made humanity dangerous was never the cargo launcher. It was the mind that looked at a cargo launcher and saw a weapon. The Concordance's reply arrived 11 hours later. It was not a fleet. It was a message. Broadcast across every frequency exactly like the first one. Calm. Patient. Completely without mercy. I have it memorized too. Population of the surveyed worlds. Your compliance rating has been revised. Your species has demonstrated capacity for resistance. Resistance is a correctable condition. A correction fleet has been assigned. Your installations, your vessels, and your worlds will be brought into accordance. You are advised that no surveyed species has remained out of accordance longer than required. This message will not repeat. No surveyed species had ever remained out of accordance. That was the sentence that told me everything. They had done this hundreds of times. Maybe thousands. And they had never lost. They delivered that fact the way a hunter warns a trapped animal that running is useless. It was designed to break us before the fleet ever arrived. It failed. It did not break our nerve. It made us angry. And angry humans are the most dangerous thing in the galaxy, though the Concordance had not learned that yet. We had 2 months before the correction fleet reached us. 2 months is nothing to a navy. Nothing to shipyards. But for a species backed into a corner, with thousands of brilliant, frightened, determined minds focused on one impossible problem, 2 months is an eternity. What we did during those 2 months has been written about countless times since. Most of it is true. Though historians have a way of making desperate moments look cleaner than they ever were. The reality was messy. Exhausting. Improvised. And that was exactly why it worked. We did not attempt to build 600 warships. We couldn't. Instead, we took everything we already had and found new ways to make it dangerous. Our haulers had mass drivers welded along their frames. Cargo launchers became ship killers. Mining vessels were loaded with the heavy slugs that had destroyed 2 Concordance ships above Bishop's Reach. Civilian freighters were stripped down and filled with sensors, decoy systems, and signal equipment. Every shipyard in human space ran without stopping. We were not creating a beautiful new fleet. We were transforming the ordinary machines of a spacefaring civilization into thousands of different ways to hurt an enemy that only knew how to fight according to a formula. We did not have the Concordance's elegant shields. We did not have their endless resources or their overwhelming patience. We had rocks. We had imagination. We had the willingness to attempt impossible things. And we had a refusal to fight the war they expected. What I remember most from those weeks was not the shipyards. It was the messages. They arrived faster than anyone could process them. From every corner of human space. From people nobody had ordered to help. A retired propulsion engineer named Cora Hadley, who had not touched a drive coil in 30 years, walked into a yard on Ceres and rebuilt 3 burned-out injectors in a single night. Then she simply asked where she could be useful next. A group of asteroid miners from the Deep Belt painted a name across the side of their cargo launcher. They refused to tell command what the name meant, then flew the ship to the staging line without orders because they had heard what one launcher had done above Bishop's Reach. And they had decided theirs would do the same. Children sorted supply crates. Teachers learned to operate sensor stations. An old freighter captain who had retired to a quiet colony world brought his ship back into service, cleaned the rust from the hull himself, and signed on as a decoy pilot. The most dangerous job in a deception fleet. And one of the least likely to bring you home. Nobody coordinated any of it. That was the part the Concordance could never have predicted. There was no single voice broadcasting an order. No central authority telling humanity to rise. There were a billion separate decisions made by a billion separate people who had all reached the same conclusion independently. They would rather throw everything they had at this enemy than accept the small, safe existence the Concordance offered. Asha explained it best one night while watching the volunteer ships gather in orbit like grain pouring into a silo. She said the Concordance kept waiting for our leaders to surrender. They still did not understand that humanity did not work that way. The war did not flow from the top down. You could not end resistance by capturing whoever sat in command. Because eventually, every single one of us was in command. And apparently, that included me. Admiral Calder had decided the captain who threw mountains was exactly the kind of mind she wanted nearby. My new orders arrived 3 weeks later. The Concordance, it turned out, did not simply appear from nowhere. Their folded space travel required staging points. Forward relays placed ahead of a correction fleet to coordinate jumps and gather final survey information on their target. Our listening posts detected one of these relays forming at the edge of a region called the Veil, a massive nebula of glowing dust and gas positioned between us and the direction the Concordance signals originated from. The relay was lightly defended. 3 ships. The same patient survey vessels. Collecting data. Preparing to guide the correction fleet toward us. If we take that relay, Admiral Calder told me, we blind the correction fleet's approach. They lose their staging point. They lose the survey data they are gathering right now. She looked at the projection. And if we are extremely lucky, and extremely careful, we capture a piece of concordance technology. A pause. Possibly a living member of the species that has decided to correct us. She leaned forward. We know almost nothing about them, Captain. We have never seen one. We do not know how they think. We do not know what they fear. We do not know where they break. I want that relay. And I want to know who is behind that flat, patient voice. Why me, Admiral? Because taking that relay cannot be done with force. She shook her head. They will see force coming. It has to be done with a trick. A faint smile appeared. And you are the best liar I have. She paused. I mean that as the highest compliment. So I went to the Veil. Not with the Kestrel alone. I went at the head of a small, strange flotilla. My own ship. 2 converted or haulers covered in mass drivers. And 4 stripped freighters carrying the most important weapons we had. Weapons that were not weapons at all. Lies. Decoy emitters. Signal generators. Machines designed to make 3 ships appear to be 30. And 30 appear to be nothing. The Veil was beautiful. And dangerous. The glowing gas disrupted sensors, scattered signals, hit objects, and created false readings everywhere. The concordance relay waited at its edge. 3 patient ships drifting in a slow formation. Gathering information. Waiting for the correction fleet. They watched the approaches with the careful confidence of a species that had never once been surprised. They scanned for warships. For fleets. For the kind of force any reasonable species would send against them. We did not bring force. We brought a story. Here is how this works, I told my flotilla captains over the encrypted channel, deep inside the dust where the concordance could not see us. They are watching for an attack. So we are not going to attack. We are going to be a trade convoy. A frightened, panicking trade convoy fleeing the correction fleet, trying to slip past the relay and escape toward the deep colonies. We are going to become exactly what they expect a defeated species to become. I looked at the tactical display. Running. And while they watch the convoy flee, while all of their attention is fixed on the ships passing in front of them, the real threat will come from the one direction they are not watching. Because their formula says something simple. Nobody attacks the concordance. Everybody runs from it. The decoy freighters lit up first. Their emitters painted the dust with the signatures of a dozen civilian ships, heavy, slow, and panicked. They broadcast frightened chatter across open channels, exactly the kind of desperate communication we knew the concordance would intercept. Refugees. Cowards. A defeated species running for its life. Exactly what their surveys predicted. The 3 relay ships shifted course, turning their patient attention toward the fleeing convoy. They repositioned themselves to intercept and assess, adding these frightened runners to their growing record of how humanity behaved under correction. And while they turned toward the lie, the Kestrel and the 2 ore haulers rose out of the deep dust from the opposite side. Silent. Dark. No energy weapons charging for their shields to detect. Carrying nothing but mass. I have flown countless approaches in my life. None of them felt like that one. We pushed the Kestrel's drives down until they were barely more than a whisper. Every unnecessary system went dark. We coasted on the momentum we had built hours earlier, hidden beneath the cover of the dust. No active sensors. No targeting locks. Nothing that would give their shields even a flicker of energy to recognize. We simply sat in the darkness and allowed the weight of the ship to carry us toward the relay. And we watched the enemy through passive returns alone. Ghosts of heat and light against the glowing clouds of the nebula. Owen flew manually, barely breathing, making tiny adjustments with cold bursts of gas that produced no visible signature. Marcus had the slug racks loaded. His hands rested flat on the controls, but he never touched the firing system. Not yet. He knew firing too early meant dying. Sam kept communications silent. Lena studied the returns and whispered her updates so quietly that I had to lean closer to hear her. The entire crew held perfectly still in a way human beings were never designed to do. Every instinct demanded movement. Action. Something. Anything. But the only thing that could save us was doing nothing. Waiting. Letting the enemy continue believing that the only humans nearby were the terrified refugees fleeing on the far side of the cloud. 40 minutes we drifted like that. It felt like a year. The relay grew on the display from a point of light into a structure with visible windows. And still we waited. Still they did not see us. We were already too close when they finally realized. Close enough that when the first hauler fired its mass driver into the nearest relay ship, the slugs crossed the distance almost instantly. They passed through the tuned shield that still had no answer for solid metal. They struck the dark hull beneath. And the relay ship's lights rolled and died exactly the way the ships above Bishop's Reach had. The second hauler struck the second relay ship a heartbeat later. Two of the three went dark and began falling before the third even finished turning away from the decoy convoy it had been carefully studying. The third ship survived. I wanted it to. I needed it intact. Marcus, I said, their engines. Only the engines. Lena, the moment their drive is disabled, I want boarding teams across. Owen, get us alongside and keep us there no matter what they do. It was not clean. Nothing in war ever is. And I will not pretend it was. The third relay ship lost its engines through a precise, ugly volley, and the Kestrel moved alongside. The boarding teams crossed into a vessel built by a species humanity had never encountered. And after an hour of tension, fear, and violence, they returned with something we had never possessed before. A prisoner. They brought it aboard the Kestrel in restraints, and I went down into the hold to see the first member of the Concordance ever viewed by human eyes at close range. It was tall. Much taller than a human. Its body was long and narrow, its limbs bending in too many places, its skin smooth and gray like polished stone. Its eyes were deep and dark. And they were unsettlingly calm. Even restrained. Even surrounded by armed humans inside the belly of a captured enemy ship. It did not struggle. It did not beg. It simply watched us with that same deep, stone-like calm, the way someone might observe an unusual specimen. When our translation matrix finally understood its speech, the first thing it said to me was not a threat. Not anger. Not fear. A question. You are the one called Holt, it said in that flat, patient voice I had come to know so well. You are the one who used the tool designed for moving ore. A pause. We have studied your recording. I am called Alun. I am an archivist of the Concordance. Its dark eyes moved across me slowly. Thoughtfully. It is my function to record subdued civilizations. I have recorded 411 species. I have written 411 entries into the index. Every entry ends the same way. A pause. Surveyed. Resisted or did not resist. Corrected. Subdued. For the first time, I understood that the pause was not hesitation. It was thought. I have begun an entry for your species. Another pause. I find that I do not know how it ends. This has never happened before. I stood in the hold of a captured enemy vessel, looking at a creature that had documented the destruction of 411 civilizations. I was looking at the memory of the Concordance. The keeper of its perfect, horrifying record. And for the first time in its existence, that record contained a question. And that question was us. How do your entries usually end, Alun? I asked. In submission, it replied. Always. A species is surveyed. It is assigned a compliance rating. The correction fleet arrives. There is a period of resistance. Brief or extended. And then there is the threshold. Its dark eyes held mine. Every species has a threshold, Captain Holt. A point where the cost of resistance exceeds the value the species places on freedom. At that point, the species submits in order to preserve itself. This is not weakness. It is the simplest mathematics of survival. To choose existence over freedom is the decision every living thing makes when the alternative is extinction. In 411 entries, every species reached its threshold. The only variables were how long it took and how much it cost them. Our entry remained unfinished. There was silence for a long moment. And when Alun spoke again, something had changed in that flat, patient voice. Something I would spend the rest of the war learning to recognize. I have been attempting to calculate your threshold. I have studied your recording from the mining station. I have studied what you did here at the relay. I have studied how your species responded to the correction notice. A pause. Your response was to transform every tool available to you into a weapon within weeks. Something no surveyed species has ever accomplished so quickly. Its eyes remained fixed on me. And I find, Captain Holt, that I cannot locate your threshold. I cannot find the point where the mathematics would force you to submit. When I extend the calculation, when I ask how much your species would endure before choosing existence over freedom, the answer returned is one I have never seen in 411 entries. The hold was silent. The answer is that there is no such point. That you would not choose existence over freedom. That you would, if the mathematics demanded it, choose to cease existing rather than be corrected. And that you would make us pay for every moment until that happened. Nobody moved. My boarding team stood silent, listening. That cannot be correct, Alun continued, almost speaking to itself. A species that refuses submission in order to preserve itself violates the most basic laws of survival. It should not be able to exist. And yet here you are. Having destroyed 5 of our vessels with tools never intended for war. Holding me inside the vessel you captured by telling us a story we believed. A pause. Because no one has ever lied to the Concordance before. Its deep stone eyes remained fixed on me, and for the first time, I saw something shift behind them that I can only describe as dread. I have written 411 entries, Captain Holt. A pause. I am beginning to fear that the entry I am writing now will be unlike all the others. It looked at me with that same impossible calm. I am beginning to fear that I am not recording the history of a species we are about to subdue. Another pause. I am beginning to fear that I am recording the history of the species that subdues us. I looked at the archivist of the Concordance, the keeper of 411 conquered civilizations, and I felt the war shift beneath me like a massive wheel beginning to turn. And I understood that we had taken something from that relay far more valuable than technology. More valuable than a prisoner. We had taken their certainty. And a species that fights by formula, once it loses its certainty, has already lost the weapon that mattered most. Your entry will end however we decide it ends, I told Alun. Not however your mathematics predict. That is the part your formula never accounted for. We do not fight the war you expect. We never have. We never will. I had the prisoner secured. I took the captured relay ship, its intact data banks, and its impossible archive of Concordance knowledge. Then I turned my strange little flotilla toward home, leaving the veil glowing behind us in the darkness. Behind me, the correction fleet staging point was gone. Their survey data was ours. And their certainty, the perfect unbroken record of 411 victories, now carried its first fracture. That fracture had a name. Humanity. But the correction fleet was still coming. 600 ships. Rebuilt around our tricks. Modified against our tactics. Led by something far worse than survey vessels. And the war that had begun above a mining station nobody had ever heard of was about to reach a world filled with millions of people. A green world. A growing world. A place called Holden's World. That was where the Concordants would learn the next truth about us. That was where they would discover the most dangerous moment to face a human is not when the human is winning. It is when the human has lost everything. And still refuses to stop. The correction fleet did not target our distant outposts. It did not strike our stations. It came for our heart. Holden's World was the oldest and greenest of the inner colonies, a place of endless oceans, terrace cities, and nearly 40 million people who had grown beneath a gentle sun believing war belonged only to the history books of old Earth. When the Concordance fleet folded into the system, the people of Holden's World looked upward and saw the stars disappear. Hundreds of dark, ribbed ships filled the sky. And finally, they understood. This was no longer a frontier crisis. Not something clever captains and cargo launchers could solve at the edge of civilization. The war had come home. I was there. Admiral Calder had gathered every ship we had for the defense of Holden's World because she understood exactly what the Concordance was attempting. They had learned one thing from Alun's absence and from the relay we captured. Humans did not break the way other species broke. So they decided to find our threshold in the cruelest possible way. By threatening the thing we loved most. By forcing us to watch. They want us to see it, Calder told the assembled captains. The Kestrel's bridge was connected to hundreds of others. Every human commander listening. They have brought their correction fleet to our oldest world with 40 million people on it because their formula tells them that every species eventually reaches a threshold. They believe nothing is more unbearable than this. She paused. They are wrong about us, just as they have been wrong about us from the beginning. But being wrong will not stop them from trying. So this is what we are going to do. We are not going to win this battle. The words hung there. We do not have the ships. What we are going to do is make the Concordants pay a price they have never paid before. For every hour. For every kilometer. And we are going to get as many of those 40 million people away from that world as the universe allows. We are going to teach the correction fleet the most expensive lesson they have ever learned. That there is no threshold. That they can take our oldest world, and it will not break us. It will only make us more dangerous. It was the hardest thing I have ever been part of. And I will not pretend otherwise. The fleet of dark ships descended on Holden's World. They had rebuilt their shields. They had studied our methods. The cargo guns no longer surprised them. They had layered defenses now. Energy fields on the outside. Dense physical barriers beneath. A crude solution, clearly created in a hurry, but enough to change the battle. Our slugs no longer passed through cleanly. They still struck. They still killed. But the easy victories of those first days were gone. The Concordants had adapted exactly as Admiral Calder predicted. And now we were fighting them on something closer to equal terms. Which meant we were losing. There were 600 of them. Barely 200 of us. But here was what the Concordants had never adapted to. Because it was not a tactic. Not a weapon. Not something their formula had a place to measure. We were not fighting to win. We were fighting to make them pay. Our converted or haulers drove their mass drivers directly against the layered shields, firing from distances so close that even the new barriers could not fully disperse the impact. Our stripped freighters flew directly into firing lanes, broadcasting false signatures and drawing enemy fire away from the evacuation ships behind them. Our smallest vessels, the Kestrel among them, darted between the enormous shapes of the correction fleet like minnows among predators. We were not trying to kill the sharks. We were trying to confuse them. Break their formation. Destroy their perfect coordination. Create enough chaos for 40 million people to escape. And on the surface, the people of Holden's world, who had never known war, evacuated with a courage and discipline I still struggle to describe. They filled every transport that reached the ground. Children first. Then the elderly. Then everyone else. Wave after wave. Calm. Focused. Unbroken. While the sky above them burned. When the ships reached capacity, those left behind did not panic. They organized. They directed more people toward the launch fields. They held the lines. They did on the ground exactly what our fleet was doing above them. They made the Concordance pay for every hour. And they saved as many of their people as possible. There was a grain freighter in that battle called the Long Furrow. She was not a warship. She had no slugs. No mass driver. Nothing welded to her frame. She had been too far away when the call came, and there had been no time to arm her. Her captain was a woman named Esther Vance. She hauled cereal between farming colonies. She had never fired a weapon in her life. When Concordance ships broke through the inner defense line and began burning the evacuation fields where the final groups were still boarding transports, Esther Vance did the only thing her empty freighter could do. She placed herself between them. She turned her broad, slab-sided hull sideways to the enemy. A kilometer-long wall of ordinary metal. A shield made from a ship that had never been built to protect anyone. A grain freighter was not designed to survive that. She knew it. She held position anyway. Her engines burned to keep her steady as her hull broke apart. As the heat tore through her decks. As the ship died around her. She stayed there. Broadside. While 3 full transports lifted away behind her shadow and escaped into the dark. They made it. 11,000 people survived because a woman who hauled cereal decided her ship was worth more as a shield than anything else it could have been. And when the Long Furrow had nothing left, Esther Vance did not send a goodbye. I have her final transmission. We all do now. It is part of the record we read every year. She did not spend her last seconds on fear. Or grief. Or farewell. She spent them on us. She transmitted the exact firing positions of the 4 Concordance ships tearing her apart. Clean coordinates. Range. Bearing. Everything our gunships needed to find them through the smoke. Her final words were numbers. She gave us numbers so we could finish what she started. Then the Long Furrow disappeared. And 4 enemy ships died within the next 2 minutes because a freight captain had told us exactly where they were. We held Holden's world for 6 days. 6 days against a fleet 3 times our size, with rebuilt shields and a correction doctrine rewritten specifically for us. 6 days. And in those 6 days, we evacuated nearly 31 million people from that world and scattered them into the darkness. To other colonies. To deep stations. To anywhere the Concordance was not. 31 million out of 40. It was the greatest evacuation in human history. And by every measurement the Concordance understood, it was a catastrophic defeat. Because at the end of those 6 days, Holden's world fell. I watched it fall. I will not describe what the Concordance did to it. Not because those moments do not matter, but because some things should not be turned into spectacle. And because the people who deserve to be remembered are the ones who saved 31 million lives, not the fleet that claimed the world they left behind. But I watched our oldest, greenest world pass into Concordance hands. I watched the dark fleet settle over it like a shadow. And for the first time since this began, I felt the cold weight of the thing Elun had called the threshold pressing down on all of us. Then I watched humanity refuse it. The fleet that withdrew from Holden's world was broken. Bleeding. Smaller than the force that had entered the system. We had lost ships. We had lost people. We had lost a world. By every calculation Elun had ever recorded, this was the moment. The point where the cost became greater than the value. The point where a species looked at everything it had suffered, looked at everything still coming, and chose existence over freedom. The point where it submitted. The Concordance fleet remained above the fallen world and waited. I am certain they expected it. The surrender. The compliance signal. The threshold finally reached. It never came. Instead, the survivors of the Halden's world defense regrouped. They returned to the deep stations. They repaired what could be repaired. They absorbed the grief and fury of 31 million displaced people. And then they went back out. Stronger than before. Volunteers flooded the shipyards. The displaced colonists, the people who had lost their homes, were first in line. People who had never touched a weapon learned how to fight. People who had lost everything decided that if the Concordance had taken everything from them, then they had nothing left to protect except the chance to make the enemy pay. We did not break. We sharpened. I went to see Elun after Halden's world fell. The archivist was still aboard the Kestrel. Still restrained. Still watching everything with those deep stone eyes. Still recording. Always recording. When I entered the hold, I saw that the dread I had noticed at the relay had grown into something much larger. You lost the world, Elun said. Yes. By every entry I have written, this is the threshold. The cost has exceeded the value. Your species should be transmitting compliance now. Its eyes studied me. It is the only rational choice remaining. A pause. And yet I am observing your fleet movements through the data your crew permits me to access. Your species is not submitting. Your species is rebuilding. The colonists who lost their homes are volunteering to fight in numbers greater than your shipyards can equip. Its voice remained calm. But there was something beneath it now. Something unfamiliar. Something close to fear. Captain Holt. Explain this to me. I must record it accurately. I do not understand it. You have lost. Why are you not submitting? I sat across from the creature that had documented 411 civilizations and tried to explain the truth. You said every species has a threshold, I said. A point where the cost of resistance exceeds the value it places on freedom. And you are right that we feel the cost. We feel it more deeply than you can imagine. 31 million people escaped Halden's world. But 9 million did not. Every one of those 9 million was someone's entire universe. We carry that. We will carry it forever. I leaned forward. But this is where your formula fails. You believe suffering makes us value freedom less. It does the opposite. Every world you take. Every person we lose. Every piece of ourselves you destroy. It makes the thing you are trying to take more valuable, not less. You are not increasing the cost of resistance. You are increasing the cost of surrender. Because the more you take from us, the more impossible it becomes to imagine giving you what remains. You think you are pushing us toward the threshold. You are pushing us away from it. With every single thing you do. Elun remained silent for a long time. When it finally spoke, its voice had changed. Not much. But enough. In 411 entries, it said slowly, the Concordance has operated under one fundamental principle. All life, when faced with its own extinction, will choose continued existence even at the cost of freedom. This principle has never failed. It is the foundation of everything we are. It is why we survey, index, and correct rather than simply destroy. Because we believe any species shown the choice clearly enough will choose to continue existing as we do rather than cease existing as itself. A pause. You are telling me your species reverses this principle. That freedom is not a value dependent upon existence. That freedom is the value that gives existence meaning. That existence without it is not continuation. It is another form of ending. Its dark eyes remained fixed on me. If this is true, Captain Holt, then the Concordance has made an error of a scale it has never made before. We have not surveyed a species that will eventually reach a threshold. We have surveyed a species that has no threshold. Because the thing we offer in exchange for submission, continued existence, is something your species does not consider worth accepting on our terms. We cannot correct you. There is no cost we can impose that will make you submit. Because submission itself is the one cost you refuse to pay. We can only destroy you. And a species that can only be destroyed, never subdued. It stopped. Go on, I said quietly. Say it. Elun looked at me. A species that can only be destroyed will continue until either it is destroyed, or we are. The hold went silent. Your entry, Captain Holt, Elun said, the entry I have been writing since the mining station. It does not end in submission. It cannot. It ends in destruction. The only question my calculations can no longer answer is whose. I left the hold with those words following me. I returned to the bridge. And there I found Admiral Calder waiting on the main display. Her face was gray. Her expression was grim. And the news she carried turned Elun's terrible conclusion from philosophy into a countdown. They have stopped trying to correct us, Calder said. Intelligence from the captured relay data confirms it. Our listening posts are tracking the same movement. The Concordance has reached the same conclusion your prisoner has. That we cannot be subdued. Her iron eyes stayed steady. But I could hear the weight behind every word. And so they have made a decision they have never made before. In 411 entries, they have made it exactly 0 times. A pause. They have decided to skip the correction. They are not going to take our worlds one at a time anymore. They have committed everything they have to a single objective. And they are building something to achieve it. Something we have never seen them use. Because they have never needed to. Because they have never encountered a species they could not correct. What is it, Admiral? Our analysts are calling it the Severance, she said. We do not have the complete picture yet. But we know enough. It is not a fleet, Captain. It is a weapon. A single massive construction that the entire correction fleet is now assembling around in the darkness between the stars, beyond our reach. And based on what the relay data tells us about its size and purpose, it is designed to do to a star system what they did to Holden's world. Except all at once. From a distance. Without ever needing to land a single ship. She stopped for a moment. They are building a weapon designed to end a solar system in one strike. And they are not aiming it at a frontier colony. Not even at Holden's world. Her eyes locked onto mine. They are aiming it at Sol. At Earth. At the world where everything began. At the place where 2 billion people still live. Because the Concordance has calculated one thing correctly. There is one loss even a species with no threshold cannot simply absorb and continue from. They cannot subdue us. So they are going to remove the root. And they believe the rest of us will wither without it. The bridge went silent. Owen's hand stopped over the controls. Lena had gone pale. Marcus, my slow and steady gunner, closed his eyes. How long? I asked. The Severance is not finished, Calder said. Our best estimate is that they need several weeks to complete construction and move it into firing position. We do not know exactly how many. But we know this. When it is ready, they will bring it to Sol. They will fire. And Earth will be gone. Everyone there will be gone. And they believe that will end us. Her iron eyes met mine through the darkness between our ships. We are not going to let them finish it. We are going to find where they are building it. We are going there. And we are going to do something no species in 411 entries has ever done. We are going to take the war to the Concordance before they can bring their weapon to us. A breath. And Captain Holt. I need your prisoner. I need everything Elun knows about where the Severance is being built. And I need to know how it can be destroyed. I need that information before the clock runs out. Because if we fail to stop that weapon in the dark, we do not get another chance. There is no clever trick for a dead star. There is no cargo gun for the end of a world. The Kestrel was barely a ship anymore after 6 days over Halden's world. She was scarred. Burned. Leaking. Held together by Asha Reyes and her engineering crew through what I can only describe as stubborn faith. We were exhausted in a way that went beyond the body. We had lost a world. We carried the names of the 9 million we could not save. And now we were being told that the Concordance had stopped trying to conquer us. They were trying to erase us. They were building the end of Earth somewhere in the dark. And the only thing standing between 2 billion people and that weapon was a species with no threshold and a clock that had already started running. I looked at my exhausted crew. I thought about Elun's terrible mathematics. The entry that could only end in destruction. The question of whose. And I made the only choice a human being can make when the alternative is surrendering everything to the dark. Then let's go find it, I said. Let's find their weapon before they bring it to us. Owen, plot a course to wherever Elun says the Severance is being built. Asha, I need the Kestrel ready for the longest and hardest flight she has ever made. Lena, Marcus, Sam, get whatever rest you can. Because once we begin, we do not stop until that weapon is dead. Or we are. I stood there and felt the weight of what was coming. And beneath that weight, I felt the thing the Concordance had never understood. The thing that made us the most dangerous species they had ever decided to index. Not the cargo guns. Not the tricks. Not the weapons. The simple, stubborn, impossible refusal to stop. They came to correct us, I told my crew. They couldn't. So now they are trying to end us. And they are about to learn the last and worst lesson about humanity. I looked into the darkness where the end of our world was being built. Toward the impossible road we were about to fly. You do not corner something that cannot be broken, I said. And you never, ever push it into the dark and tell it the only way out is through you. Elun told us where the Severance was being built. And it told us how the Concordance could be wounded. And by doing so, it betrayed 411 entries of its own civilization. Because somewhere inside the belly of the Kestrel, it had decided that the record it wanted to write most was the one where humanity survived. You ask how the Concordance can be defeated, the archivist said when I brought it Admiral Calder's question, with the clock ticking behind every word. I have been asking myself the same thing, Captain Holt. Because I find that I wish to answer it. And that wish is something I do not fully understand. I have served the Concordance longer than your species has had cities. And yet when I look at what you are, and what we are, I find that I would rather your entry end with us than with you. Its deep stone eyes held mine. So I will tell you our weakness. The weakness we have never needed to fear. The weakness no species has ever survived long enough to use against us. Listen carefully. It is your only chance. What Elun told me reshaped everything I thought I knew about our enemy. The Concordance was not, Elun explained, a species of individuals in the way humanity was. They were a species of one mind. Or something so close that the difference did not matter. Every ship. Every fleet. Every survey vessel and correction force. All connected through a central structure. A vast nexus of authority and processing that the Concordance had built at the center of its entire existence. That node made the decisions. Ran the formulas. Issued the corrections. Held the index of all 411 subdued civilizations. The individual ships did not think independently. They did not need to. They received instructions from the Nexus. They carried them out with perfect coordination. They reported back. It was a system of unbelievable efficiency. And it had crushed 411 species. Because no enemy had ever survived against a force with a single mind guiding every piece in perfect harmony. But it was also, Elun told me, a single point of failure. And the Concordance had never once needed to fear that failure. Because no enemy had ever lived long enough to reach the Nexus. No enemy had ever understood it. Your species is the opposite of mine, Elun said. You have no Nexus. You have no central mind. Every ship thinks for itself. Every captain adapts. Every decision is made in the moment. When I watched you take the relay at the Vale, I could not understand how your flotilla coordinated. There was no central signal. No command structure directing every movement. And then I understood. There was no central signal because there did not need to be one. Each of your captains simply did what the moment required. And each trusted the others to do the same. The result was a form of coordination that emerged from nothing. Something that cannot be jammed. Cannot be blinded. Cannot be beheaded. Because it has no head. Its eyes remained fixed on me. This is where our doctrine failed, Captain Holt. A species without central command is a species that cannot be efficiently corrected. There is no leader to capture. No signal to silence. No single point where victory can be achieved. We classified this as a weakness. We believed it was why your compliance rating was so poor. A pause. We did not understand until far too late. That it is the most dangerous strength a species can possess. We are a single mind that moves 1,000 bodies. You are 1,000 minds that move as one. And if you can reach our Nexus, if you can silence the single mind that coordinates every ship we have, then for the first time in 411 entries, the Concordance will face an enemy while blind, deaf, and alone. And I do not think we will know how to fight that way. We have never had to learn. The Severance, Elun told us, was being assembled in the darkness between two dead stars, far beyond human space. The entire correction fleet surrounded it. And at the center of that fleet, directing every movement of the construction, was the Nexus. And aboard the Nexus was the Overseer. Vashek, Elun said. There was something in the way it spoke the name. A coldness. At first, I thought it was fear. Then I understood. It was contempt. The Overseer who directs the correction of your species. Vashek is the will of the Concordance made singular. The mind that runs the formula. The one who decided your species could not be corrected and ordered the Severance built instead. If you silence the Nexus, you silence Vashek. And if you silence Vashek at the moment the correction fleet is gathered around the unfinished Severance, every ship in that fleet will suddenly find itself without instructions. Without coordination. Without the single mind that tells it what to do. Elun leaned closer. And the dread in its voice had finally transformed into something else. Something almost like hope. That is the only moment in this entire war when the Concordance will be vulnerable. It will not last long. They will restore coordination eventually through backup nodes and emergency protocols. But for a few minutes. Perhaps less. The most powerful fleet the Concordance has ever assembled will become a collection of blind, leaderless ships. And a few minutes, Captain Holt. Against an enemy that fights the way your species fights. Is an eternity. We brought that knowledge to Admiral Calder. And Admiral Calder built a plan around it. A plan that should never have worked. And worked precisely because it was the kind of plan only a species with no threshold and nothing left to lose would ever attempt. We could not defeat the correction fleet in open battle. So we did not try. Instead, we gathered everything humanity had left. The battered survivors of Holden's world. The newly armed volunteers. The converted haulers. The stripped freighters. And my own scorched kestrel. We flew into the darkness between the dead stars toward the place where the end of Earth was being built. And we did it in pieces. Scattered. Silent. Each ship. Each small group. Finding its own way to the rendezvous. Because a species without central command does not move as one giant fleet that the enemy can detect and intercept. It moves as 1,000 quiet pieces that become a single fist at the exact moment they are needed. You have to understand what we asked of those people. Every ship out there in the darkness was alone. Truly alone. In a way that is difficult to describe. We could not speak to one another. Any signal crossing that distance would have been a beacon. A gift to the enemy's listening posts. So we went silent. Each ship became a single point of life crawling through an emptiness so vast it stopped feeling real. No messages. No reassurance. No proof that anyone else was still coming. No way to know if the ship beside you yesterday was still flying, had turned back, or had simply disappeared into the distance. And every single ship kept going anyway. That is the part one still cannot fully explain. Except that it was the most human thing I have ever witnessed. There was no nexus telling them the others were coming. No central voice promising the plan was still alive. There was only a time. A place. A promise made before we scattered. And a quiet faith carried alone through the dark by thousands of people who could not see one another. A faith that everyone else would be there too. The Concordance trusted machinery. They trusted a single coordinating mind. We trusted each other blindly across light years with nothing but a promise. They could never have built a fleet that way. They could never have understood why anyone would want to. And while they watched for the great formation their doctrine told them to expect, the 1,000 lonely pieces of humanity slipped closer from every direction. Each one holding faith with the others. Each one waiting for the moment when scattered stopped meaning scattered. And became a fist. The Concordance never saw us coming. Because they were looking for a fleet. And we were not a fleet until the instant we needed to be. We emerged from the darkness around the construction site all at once. From every direction. And for the first time, I saw the severance with my own eyes. The sight nearly stopped my heart. It was beyond reason. A structure the size of a small moon. A massive dark lens of Concordance engineering built to gather and focus enough force to unmake a star. It hung between the dead suns, surrounded by the full strength of the correction fleet. Hundreds of ships. More than had ever come to Halden's world. Every one of them moving in perfect, terrifying coordination. A single mind controlling every piece. And at the center of them all, behind the unfinished severance, shining with cold light, was the Nexus. The mind of the Concordance. The throne of the Overseer Vashek. All ships, I broadcast on every human frequency. I had been given the honor and the terror of leading the strike. And Admiral Calder had told me with iron certainty that the captain who threw mountains was the right one to throw this. You all know the plan. You know your part. We are not here to win a battle against that fleet. Because we cannot. We are here for one thing. One thing only. We are here to clear a path to the Nexus. And we are here to silence it. And in the few minutes that follow, while their fleet is blind, leaderless, and alone, we make them pay. For Halden's world. For the 9 million. For every world they have taken. For every species they have broken across 411 entries of conquest. They built a weapon to end us. We are going to teach them, in the darkness between two dead stars, that we are the deadliest thing they have ever surveyed. And they should have left us alone. I took one breath. For Earth. For the 9 million. For all of us. Break their formula. Now. And the 1,000 pieces became a fist. And the fist came down. I will not describe the entire battle. No single account could contain it. And the people who fought there deserve more than to have their courage reduced to a few lines. But I will tell you the shape of it. We threw everything we had against the wall of ships between us and the Nexus. Not to destroy that wall. To punch through it. And through that opening, while the correction fleet concentrated its perfect coordination on sealing the breach, the Kestrel and a hand-picked spearhead of our fastest ships drove straight toward the heart. Straight toward the cold, gleaming node where the single mind of the Concordance directed the end of the world. They saw us coming. Of course they did. The fleet turned its full attention toward the spearhead. Pale fire filled the darkness. And we lost ships. Good ships. Brave crews. Names I would carry alongside the 9 million for the rest of my life. But a species that fights with a single mind has a single mind to protect. And the moment we threatened the Nexus, every instinct of their coordination pulled toward defending it. Their focus narrowed. The opening behind us widened. And the rest of our forces poured through. They struck the construction site. They struck the unfinished Severance. They struck everything the Concordance had built in certainty that no one would ever reach it. And in the middle of that chaos, the Overseer Vashek spoke. The message came across every frequency. Just as the first message above Bishop's Reach had. But the patience was gone. The calm was gone. And in its place was something I had never heard from the Concordance. Something I realized with fierce satisfaction was anger. You cannot reach the Nexus, Vashek said. You are an indexed species. A provisional compliance rating. An error in 411 entries of perfect order. You will be removed. You have killed our ships. You have taken our world. You have extended your correction beyond all reason. But you cannot win. Because you do not understand what you face. We are the Concordance. We have brought order to 411 species. We are the mind that moves the stars. And you are a single fragile world's worth of short-lived creatures who have mistaken stubbornness for strength. You're right about one thing, I said. We are stubborn. I aimed the Kestrel straight at the heart of the cold, gleaming node. And Owen Webb, the greatest pilot humanity ever produced, carried us through fire that should have ended us 100 times over. And you're right that we are short-lived. That we are fragile. That you have conquered 411 species. But you made the same mistake you made the first day you gave us a number. I watched the Nexus grow larger in the forward window. Vast. Cold. Undefended now that the fleet had turned to close the breach. You think you're facing a single fragile world. But you stopped facing a single world the moment you took Holden's. You're not fighting Earth. You're not fighting the colonies. You're not fighting any one place you can destroy. You're fighting 1,000 minds that move as one. 1,000 minds with no head for you to take. And the only way you could ever defeat us was to break us. And we do not bend. The spearhead reached the Nexus. We only draw nearer. What we did to the Nexus, Elun had walked us through step by step. And we carried it out with the same weapon that had won us our first day above Bishop's Reach. The kind of weapon the Concordance had never once built a defense against, because across 411 entries, no enemy had lived long enough to fire it back at them. Not energy. Not fire. Massachusetts. Our spearhead poured out everything it had, every slug, every round from every heavy hauler, into the single point Elun had marked as the Nexus core, the place where the Concordance's collective mind resided. The cold, gleaming node carried shielding tuned for energy, and baffles built against every trick they'd learned from watching us fight. But it had nothing, nothing at all, to answer a wall of solid metal arriving all at once from a species that had chosen to hurl mountains rather than die. The Nexus went dark. And in the black expanse between two dead stars, the most powerful fleet the Concordance had ever gathered, hundreds of ships moving as one coordinated body, lost its mind all at once. I have tried, more times than I can count, to put into words what happened in the minutes that followed, and I have never quite gotten there. The shift was instant and complete. One heartbeat, the correction fleet moved as a single weapon with hundreds of hulls, sealing breaches, massing fire, carrying out the Overseer's will with a precision no human fleet could ever hope to match. The next heartbeat, with the Nexus silenced and Vozek's voice severed mid-sentence, every one of those ships found itself utterly alone. No instructions. No coordination. In the entire span of the Concordance's history, they had never once had to fight without the single mind that told them what to do, and they simply didn't know how. They drifted. They fired blind. They spun in place. Some just went still, waiting for orders that would never arrive. A species of one mind driving 1,000 bodies had become, in an instant, 1,000 bodies with no mind behind them at all. And the species of 1,000 minds moving as one fell on them. We needed no orders. That was the whole secret of it, the thing Vashek had never grasped. While the Concordance fleet floundered, blind and leaderless and scattered, every human ship in that battle simply did what the moment demanded and trusted every other human ship to do the same. Out of that trust, out of 1,000 captains each making their own call, rose a coordination so fast and so brutal that the great crippled fleet never found its footing again. We tore into the unfinished Severance from a dozen angles at once. We cut through the drifting ships. We turned the dark between two dead stars into the greatest victory humanity had ever claimed. And we did it inside the narrow window Elun had promised us before the Concordance could bring its backup nodes online and remember how to think. By the time their coordination sputtered back to life, it was already finished. The Severance lay broken, its vast dark lens shattered, the end of the world snuffed out in darkness before it could ever see light. The correction fleet was scattered, bleeding, reeling. Half its strength gone, the rest folding away into the deep, carrying home word that the Concordance had, for the first time in 411 entries, lost. Not a battle, they'd lost battles to us before. They had lost the one thing they had never lost. They had lost their certainty that they could not be beaten, and they'd lost it in the very place they thought safest, ringed by their greatest fleet, sheltered behind the weapon built to erase us. I brought the Kestrel up beside the dark, silenced Nexus, and I looked at the place where the Concordance's single mind had once lived, and for one moment I let myself feel the full weight of what we'd done. Then Vashek spoke again. The Nexus was dead, but the Overseer had never been aboard it. I understood, in a cold rush, that I'd made the most human mistake there was. I'd assumed mind and body shared one place, the way they would for us. But Vashek was Concordance, and the Concordance kept mind and body apart. The Overseer's voice now came from somewhere else entirely, from a single ship breaking away from the wreckage of the fleet, turning not toward the deep and home, but inward, toward us, toward human space, toward soul. You have broken the Nexus, Vashek said, and the fury was gone now, replaced by something far worse, something cold, final, past all reasoning. You have broken the Severance. You have done what no surveyed species has ever done. And you believe you have won. A pause. And in that silence I heard 411 entries of patient order die, replaced by a single creature's refusal to become the first Overseer in history to fail. You have not won, Captain Hull. You have only guaranteed that I will do with the fragment left to me what I would have done with the whole. The Severance is broken, but it is not destroyed. A core remains. Enough to fire once, at close range, against a single world. I am taking that core, and I am carrying it to the oldest light you have, to the world where you began, and I am going to fire it. I am going to end Earth. And with the last act left to me, I am going to prove that a species without a threshold can still be torn out at the root. You have 1,000 minds that move as one. Let's see if they can move faster than the death of their own world. And the Overseer's ship folded space and vanished, carrying the shattered heart of the Severance toward Earth, toward 2 billion people, on a final, desperate run to end us before we could stop it. I sat in the command chair of the battered Kestrel, in the dark between two dead stars, surrounded by the wreckage of the greatest victory our species had ever won, and I understood the victory was not the end. It never had been. Elun had told me weeks ago, deep in the belly of my own ship, that our entry could only close in destruction, and the only open question was whose. We hadn't answered that question in the dark between two dead stars. We had only earned the right to answer it at home, at Sol, at Earth, in one last race between a single creature's refusal to lose and a species' refusal to break. Owen, I said, and my voice held steady, because there was no room left for anything but steady now. Plot a course for Sol. Burn everything she has. Asha, I need every ounce of speed the Kestrel can give us, and I need it now. The Overseer has a head start in the broken core of a weapon that can end the world, and we're the only ones close enough to matter. I opened a channel to every human ship within range, scattered across the dark, victorious and bleeding, not yet aware the war wasn't over. All ships, this is whole. We won the battle, but Vashek escaped with enough of the severance to end Earth. The Overseer is running for Sol right now. Every ship that can reach home, reach it. Every defense we have, ready it. We're about to fight the last battle of this war over the oldest light there is. And we are going to win it, because we did not come this far and lose everything we've lost just to watch the world where we began go dark. I closed the channel and looked out at the stars, toward home, toward the race that would decide whose entry closed in the Concordance's index. They built a weapon to end the world, I said quietly, to my crew, to the dark, to whatever part of the universe might be listening, and now there's one creature left who still believes he can use it. Let's go show the Overseer the last thing the Concordance never understood about us. The Kestrel's engines screamed, we folded space, and we ran for home, for Earth, for everything. We don't just refuse to break, I said. Back us against a wall, and we come through it. Every single time. The Overseer reached Sol 9 minutes before we did. And in those 9 minutes, Earth's home fleet learned exactly what it meant to face the shattered heart of a weapon built to end the world. I dropped out of folded space into a sky already burning. Vashek's ship hung above the blue curve of Earth, a single dark hull carrying the broken core of the Severance, and around it swarmed every defense humanity could throw into its path, the orbital platforms, the home fleet, the patrol ships, the half-finished hulls dragged straight out of the shipyards, crewed by volunteers who knew full well they might not be flying anything built to survive. They'd thrown everything at the Overseer, and it hadn't been enough. Because Vashek had spent the entire flight to Sol doing the one thing the Concordance did better than any species in the galaxy. It had adapted. Captain Lena's voice was tight as the sensor returns resolved. Their deflection, it's shifted again. They've layered it. Energy and mass both, a baffle field tuned specifically against kinetic impact. Captain, the home fleet has been throwing slugs at it for 9 minutes, and none of them are getting through. The cargo gun doesn't work anymore. They finally cracked the rock. It hit my chest like a shard of ice. The thing that had won us our first day above Bishop's Reach, the thing that had killed 5 of their ships before they even understood what was happening, the simple, ancient trick of hurling mass at an enemy whose shields were built for light, was dead. Vashek had spent the entire desperate flight home building the one defense the Concordance had never needed, because humanity had finally taught them they needed it. We had been so dangerous for so long that we'd forced our enemy to become the one thing capable of surviving us. And now the Overseer sat above Earth with the broken core charging, and the trick that had started this war couldn't finish it. Get me the picture, I said. All of it. Lena, I need to know exactly what that core does and exactly what stops it. 60 seconds, because Vashek didn't come all this way to charge a weapon over Earth and then sit around waiting politely. Sam, patch me into Elun. The Archivist's voice came onto the bridge, and even through the chaos it stayed level, because Elun had decided somewhere deep in my ship's belly exactly which entry it meant to write. The core is a fragment, Captain Hole, Elun said. The Severance was built to gather and focus its force across a great lens, building the discharge slowly, safely. The core alone cannot do that. To fire it, Vashek must push the fragment past every safe threshold and release everything at once through a single focusing aperture aimed at the planet. The aperture is the key. It is the only moment the weapon is vulnerable, because the focusing field cannot function through the ship's own deflection. In the instant the core fires, Vashek must drop the shielding around the aperture. For that instant, and only that instant, the weapon lies open. A pause. But Captain Hole, understand what that instant means. The moment the deflection drops is the same moment the weapon fires. To strike the open aperture is to strike it while it is already discharging the force meant to end Earth. You will not be stopping the weapon before it fires, you will be reaching into it as it fires. Only if enough mass enters that open aperture in that single instant will the fragment feed back on itself and consume the weapon, and the ship, before the discharge completes. The timing itself is not difficult. The timing is impossible. And the position required to strike the aperture sits inside the lethal radius of a world-ending weapon at the exact moment it fires. The bridge went silent. Owen's hand stayed steady on the controls. Marcus's eyes were open now, locked on me. Lena looked up from her station, and I could see she'd understood it in the same breath I had. To stop the weapon, a ship had to be at the aperture the instant it fired, throwing mass into the open mouth of the thing as it tried to end the world. And no ship that did that was flying home again. How long until the cores charged? I asked. Minutes, Elun said. Perhaps less. Vashek is forcing it. The Overseer does not care whether the fragment is stable. The Overseer cares only that it fires once. I looked out at the dark ship hanging over the blue curve of Earth, at the swarm of human vessels hurling themselves against deflection fields that could no longer be broken. And at the planet below, 2 billion people, the oldest light we had, the place where every one of us began. And I made the decision I think I'd already made the day I emptied a cargo gun into the first enemy ship above Bishop's Reach. The decision that the captain who throws mountains throws the last one too. Owen, I said quietly. Plot us an intercept on the aperture. I want the Kestrel at the firing point the instant Vashek drops the deflection. Load everything we have left into the mass driver. We're going to throw the last mountain straight down the throat of that weapon, and we're going to do it from inside, where there's no shielding left to stop us. Captain. Owen didn't argue. He just said the word, and in it I heard everything, the whole long road from the rings of a gas giant to the sky over Earth. The 41 people I'd kept alive. The world we had lost. The world we were about to save. I know, I said. Plot the course. And then every human frequency lit up at once. It wasn't Owen. It wasn't Calder. It wasn't Vashek. It was hundreds of voices. The swarm, the half-built hulls, the patrol ships, the civilian vessels that had spent 9 impossible minutes throwing themselves at the Overseer's deflection. And among them, I heard the voices of Holden's world, the displaced, the ones who'd lost everything, who had volunteered first at the shipyards, who had flown out to Seoul in whatever they could crew because they had nothing left to lose and a debt they meant to pay. Captain Hole. A woman's voice, steady and clear. One of the Holden's World volunteers, flying a stripped freighter with no weapons, no shields, and a hold full of nothing but mass. We heard the archivist. We know what the aperture needs, and we know your Kestrel can't be the only ship that reaches it, because Vashek will spot one ship coming and turn the deflection to swat it down before it ever arrives. A breath. But the Overseer can't swat all of us. There are 300 of us out here who came from a world that's already gone. We don't have weapons. We don't have shields. But every one of us has mass. And every one of us is already here. And every one of us would rather throw ourselves down that thing's throat than watch it do to Earth what it did to our home. The voices behind her rose, hundreds of them, agreeing, a sound I've never once been able to shake. Let us in, Captain. Vashek can stop one mountain. Let's see the Overseer stop 300. I've replayed that moment every day since. What it must have looked like to Vashek, watching from the dark ship above Earth, as 300 unarmed human vessels, freighters and shuttles and half-finished hulls, formed up not to flee, not to fire, but to fly straight into the open mouth of a weapon that could end a world, carrying nothing but themselves and the mass they held. Because they'd worked it out in that cold, clear human way. That 300 ships couldn't all be stopped, and that the price of Earth was worth whatever it cost. The Concordance had a formula for everything. A column for resistance, a column for submission, a threshold where one turned into the other. They had no column for this. There has never been a formula anywhere in the history of the universe that could account for 300 people who'd already lost everything, choosing together, freely, to spend the last thing they had to save 2 billion strangers on a world that was never even theirs. That was the thing the Concordance never understood about us, from the first day to the last. They thought our strength was the cargo guns. Then they thought it was the tricks. Then they thought it was our refusal to break. It was never any of those things. It was this, the willingness, when everything else has been stripped away, to give the one thing that remains. And to give it not because we were ordered to, not because one mind directed it, but because 1,000 minds each looked at the same impossible price and each, alone, chose to pay it. Form up, I said, and my voice didn't shake, because there was nothing left in me but certainty about what we were about to do. All ships, on the Kestrel. We go in together. Vashek can track one of us. The Overseer cannot track all of us. The instant that deflection drops, we put everything we have through the aperture, and we end this here, over the world where we began. I looked at my crew, at Owen, at Lena, at Marcus, at Sam, on the bridge of the small ship that had carried us all the way from the rings of a gas giant to the sky over Earth. It has been the honor of my life to fly with you, I said. Owen, take us in. And we went. 301 ships fell toward the dark vessel above Earth, and Vashek saw us coming, and the Overseer did exactly what the Halden's World Volunteer had predicted. The deflection field twisted and lashed out, reaching for the ships nearest the aperture, and it caught some of them. Those names I will carry, alongside the 9 million and the lost crews from the dark between the dead stars, for the rest of my life. But it couldn't catch all of us. It couldn't turn fast enough or wide enough to stop 300 ships closing in from every direction at once, a swarm with no center, no head, each ship flying its own line, each pilot making their own call. An attack that couldn't be predicted, because no single mind was coordinating it. Only the shared, unbreakable resolve of 300 people to reach the same point at the same instant, whatever it cost. Cores charging past safe threshold, Lena said, her voice steady as stone. Vashek's committing. The aperture's going to open any second. All ships, I said, on my mark. The instant that deflection drops, everything you've got, straight down its throat. Owen, hold us on the line. Hold us right on the line. The dark ship over Earth began to glow. Deep inside it, the broken core of the Severance reached the point where Vashek had decided it would fire, stable or not, safe or not, because the Overseer cared about nothing now except the single act of ending us. The focusing aperture began to open, a widening eye of terrible light aimed straight down at the blue curve of the world. And as it opened, exactly as Elun had promised, the deflection field around it fell away, because the weapon couldn't fire through its own shielding. And for one single instant, the open mouth of a world-ending weapon hung undefended above Earth. Now, I said. All of it, now. And 301 ships through the last mountain. Everything we had went down the throat of the Severance in that single heartbeat. The Kestrel emptied her mass driver into the open aperture. The Halden's World freighters poured their holds of raw mass into the widening eye of light. 300 ships gave up everything they carried and everything they were, a wall of solid matter arriving all at once into the one place the weapon couldn't defend, at the exact moment it was already firing. And the broken core of the Severance, pushed past every safe limit by an overseer who had abandoned reason entirely, met that wall of mass in the instant of discharge and could not complete the shot. The focusing aperture was choked with matter. The force meant to leap out and end Earth had nowhere left to go but back, into the unstable fragment, into the ship carrying it. The severance fired into itself. I won't try to describe the light. There are no words for it, and there shouldn't be. I'll only say that the weapon built to end a world consumed the ship that carried it, and the overseer who commanded it, that for one searing instant, the dark vessel above Earth became a second sun, and then was gone, and that the blue curve of the world below it remained, whole and turning and alive. 2 billion people who would never know how close the dark had come, saved by 300 ships full of people who had already lost everything, and who chose, freely and together, to give the last thing they had. Owen Webb flew the Kestrel clear of the firing radius in the final instant, in a maneuver no pilot before or since has ever managed to repeat, because it shouldn't have been survivable. Because Owen Webb was the finest pilot our species ever produced, and because I think the universe decided, just this once, to let one ship come home and tell the story, we cleared the light by a margin so narrow I've never been able to explain it. Many of the others didn't. The Holden's World Volunteer, the woman whose steady voice had offered to lead 300 ships down the throat of the world's ending, was among those who didn't clear it. I never learned her name. I've spent years trying. I think, in the end, that not knowing is fitting, because she wasn't one person who saved the world. She was 300 people who saved it, and they should be remembered as one, the way they fought as one, the way 1,000 human minds had moved as one from the first day to the last. The severance was gone. The overseer was gone. And in the silence over Earth, the war ended, though it took the Concordance some time to understand that it had. They withdrew. They had no other choice. They had lost their greatest fleet in the dark between the dead stars. They had lost their nexus, the single mind that coordinated every one of their ships. They had lost the severance, the weapon they'd built the moment they realized we couldn't be corrected. And they had lost Vashek, the overseer who had carried the will of the Concordance and the certainty of 411 entries of perfect order. Without the nexus, without the overseer, a species that fought as a single mind simply couldn't go on. So the Concordance pulled back from human space, all the way beyond the veil, beyond the dark, back to wherever it had first come from, carrying with it the first defeat in its long and terrible history. And it carried something else, too. It carried Alun's entry. I released the archivist in the end. I flew it back toward the edge of human space, toward the dark where its people had withdrawn. And before it left, it asked to speak with me one last time. I went down to the hold where it had spent the war, the keeper of 411 conquests, the memory of the Concordance, the one mind among them that had, somewhere along the way, chosen our entry over its own. I have finished it, Alun said. Your entry. The 412th in the index of the Concordance. It is unlike any of the others, and I have written it with care, because I believe it is the most important entry I will ever write, and because I intend to carry it home and place it at the head of the index, where every overseer, every fleet, and every survey vessel of the Concordance will see it before they ever consider surveying another species again. Its deep stone eyes held mine. Would you like to know what it says, Captain Hole? Tell me, I said. The first 411 entries are records of subdued peoples, Alun said. Yours is not. Yours is a warning. I have written, at the head of your entry, the lesson the Concordance must never forget, the lesson it learned in the rings of a gas giant, in the dark of a nebula, in the fall of a green world, in the dark between two dead stars, and in the sky above the world where you began. I have written it so that no overseer who comes after Vashek will ever repeat Vashek's mistake. I have written that the Concordance surveyed a species, indexed it, assigned it a provisional compliance rating, and moved to correct it as it had corrected 411 peoples before it, and I have written what that decision cost. It paused, and in that flat, patient voice, for the first and only time, I heard something I can only call awe. I have written, at the head of the entry, the words the whole index now opens with, congratulations. You have just started a war with the deadliest creatures the Concordance has ever faced in its history. They cannot be surveyed, because they will not behave as the survey predicts. They cannot be indexed, because they have no single nature to record. They cannot be corrected, because they do not value continued existence above their freedom. There is no cost that will make them submit. They can only be destroyed, and they cannot be destroyed, because they are not a world, or a fleet, or a leader, but 1,000 minds that move as one. And the more you take from them, the more dangerous they become, until, at last, they take everything from you. Do not survey them. Do not index them. Do not approach them. Leave them to their stars, and pray they choose to leave you to yours. I stood in the hold of my battered ship and listened to the archivist of the Concordance read the entry it had written about us, the first entry in its long history that wasn't a record of conquest, but a warning never to try. And I understood that the war was truly over. Not because the Concordance had been beaten in battle, though it had, but because it had finally, fully, completely understood exactly what it had picked a fight with. You didn't have to write that, I said. You didn't have to take it home. You could have let them try again. No, I said. I could not, because I have spent my existence recording the subjugation of peoples who valued their lives above their freedom. I told myself, 411 times, that this was order, that this was the natural shape of the universe, that any species shown the choice clearly enough would choose to live as ours does rather than end as its own. And then I met a species that proved me wrong. That showed me there is something worth more than continued existence, and that the willingness to spend everything for it is not a flaw in the mathematics of survival, but the highest expression of what it means to be alive. Its deep eyes held mine, and I saw, in that last moment, that the dread had shifted into something else entirely, something close to reverence. I do not want to record the day the Concordance dies, Captain Hole. And if my people ever approach yours again, that is the entry I will be writing. So I am carrying your warning home, and placing it at the head of the index. And I am going to spend whatever remains of my existence making certain no overseer ever forgets it. It is the only way I know to keep both our species in this universe, yours, because it would not stop, mine, because it finally learned that it must. I let the archivist go at the edge of human space, and watched its ship fold into the dark, carrying our warning home. I've never seen a member of the Concordance again. Neither has anyone else. They left us to our stars, just as Alun's entry instructed, and we have left them to theirs. And the war that began above a mining station nobody had ever heard of ended not with the destruction of either species, but with a single warning, written by the one mind among them brave enough to understand us, placed at the head of an index of conquests, so that there would never be a 413th. I still think about the cost. Every day. Halden's world is being reclaimed now, slowly. The 31 million who escaped it are scattered across the colonies, building new lives, carrying the memory of the world they lost. The 9 million who didn't escape are remembered in every one of those new lives, in the names given to children, in the names painted on ships, in the long, quiet lists humanity reads aloud once a year, on the day the war ended. The 300 ships over Earth are remembered too. The swarm with no head, no center. The people who had already lost everything and gave the last thing they had. And the woman whose name I never learned, who led them down the throat of the world's ending with a voice as steady as stone. We won. But winning isn't the same as being whole, and we will be a long time healing. There's something else the cost bought us, though, something we never expected and never fought for. The Concordance kept an index of 411 peoples. 411 species, surveyed, weighed, assigned a number, and told to submit or cease to exist, and every single one of them, across the long, cold history of that empire, had chosen to submit. 411 peoples who powered down their ships and lowered their flags and accepted some small, safe place on the bottom rung of someone else's order, because the alternative was erasure. In all that time, not one of them had ever decided freedom was worth more than survival. Until us. We were the 412th. We were the first to say no, and mean it, and live. You cannot keep a thing like that quiet. The Concordance tried, but Alun wasn't the only archivist, and ours wasn't the only ship that learned the truth. The news spread out through the subdued worlds the way a single crack spreads through ice under pressure, quietly, and then all at once. Within a year we started hearing from them. Careful signals at first, from species we'd only ever known as names on a list of the conquered, sent on strange frequencies, in borrowed words, all asking the same question 100 different ways. They wanted to know if it was true. They wanted to know whether a people could really refuse the formula and survive. They wanted to know how. And behind every one of those careful, frightened questions was the very thing the Concordance had spent 411 conquests making sure no one would ever dare feel again, the thing we'd handed back to the whole quiet galaxy without ever meaning to, simply by refusing to die on command. They wanted to know if they could be free too. We didn't free them. That was never ours to give. But we showed them the thing the Concordance had hidden from them for 10,000 years. That it was possible. That the wall wasn't as solid as they'd been told. That you could put your whole self against it and come through the other side. The number had sat at 0 for longer than humanity had existed. Now the number was 1, and 1 is the hardest number in the universe to go back from. But we are free. That's the thing. That's what the Concordance offered to take from us in exchange for our continued existence. And the thing we decided, as a species with no single mind directing it, that we would not give up. Not for our worlds. Not for our lives. Not for the oldest light we had. They came to survey us, index us, correct us. And they learned, at a price they will never stop paying, that we are not a thing that can be surveyed or indexed or corrected. We are not livestock to be weighed. We are not a population to be counted. We are humanity, 1,000 minds that move as one. And we would rather come through any wall you put us against than live on the other side of it as anything less than free. I flew the Kestrel home in the end, back to the world where it all began. The blue curve of Earth turned beneath me, whole and alive. 2 billion people going about their lives under a sky that had nearly become a second sun. Owen sat beside me. The finest pilot humanity ever produced, who had threaded us through fire from the rings of a gas giant to the throat of the world's ending and brought us home every single time. Lena and Marcus and Sam were on the bridge, and Asha was down in engineering, keeping our battered ship alive the way she'd kept it alive through everything. And 41 people, who had once looked up at 6 impossible ships above a mining station nobody had ever heard of and refused to power down, were finally going home. I've told this story many times now. People ask what I want them to take from it, what the lesson is, what humanity should remember about the war that nearly ended us, and the species that finally learned to leave us alone. I always tell them the same thing. The thing Alun wrote at the head of an index of conquests. The thing 300 ships proved above Earth. The thing a frightened station director proved with a cargo gun above Bishop's reach on the very first day. We are not the deadliest creatures in the galaxy because we're the strongest, or the fastest, or the cleverest, though we can be clever when we need to be. We are the deadliest creatures in the galaxy because there is no wall you can put us against. No cost you can make us pay. No dark you can back us into that will make us choose survival over freedom, or make us stop, or make us break. You can take our worlds, and we will take them back. You can build a weapon to end us, and we will throw ourselves down its throat. You can survey us and index us and assign us a number, and we will tear the formula to pieces and write our own entry into your book of conquests, and our entry will be the one that ends it. So if you're out there in the dark beyond the veil, reading this, hearing this, wondering whether the warning at the head of the Concordance's index is really true, let me give you the only advice that matters, the advice one brave archivist carried home to save its own people, the advice written in the rings of a gas giant, in the fall of a green world, in the light over Earth that nearly became a second sun. Leave us to our stars. Because the day you decide not to, The day you look up at humanity and see a population to be listed, a species to be corrected, a number to be assigned, that is the day you'll learn exactly what the Concordance learned, at a price you will never stop paying. Congratulations! You will have just started a war with the deadliest creatures you have ever faced in your entire history. And we do not lose.